Picture this. You wake up on a freezing, perfectly silent morning in the isolated forests of Siberia. And then, out of nowhere, the sky literally catches fire and the earth violently shakes beneath your feet. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a journey into an event so powerful and honestly so fundamentally baffling that it still stands as one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. We're stepping all the way back to 1908 to a moment when the quiet isolation of the taiga was completely shattered by a force that at the time totally defied all scientific explanation. And this isn't just a story about a massive explosion. It's a giant cosmic detective story, one that is absolutely crucial to our understanding of planetary defense today.
Okay, let's dive right into this. What could possibly obliterate 2,000 square kilometers of dense, solid forest, violently flatten millions of ancient trees, and yet leave absolutely zero crater behind? I mean, no way, right? This is the central, mind-bending paradox of what we now call the Tunguska Event. It's a literal cosmic whodunit that has had researchers, astrophysicists, and geologists scratching their heads for over a century. Just think about the physics for a second. In our observable world, massive destruction on this kind of scale requires a tangible, massive point of impact. How do you wipe out an entire region without leaving a single dent in the ground to prove what actually hit you?
So let's look at how this terrifying sequence actually unfolded on the ground. It was the morning of June 30th, 1908. At 0 seconds, local indigenous Evenki witnesses and settlers reported this giant, terrifying sphere of fire just tearing across the sky. And this wasn't just your average shooting star. It moved with this undeniable, blinding purpose. Then, barely 5 seconds later, an intense, brilliant white flash completely overwhelmed the area. We're talking a light so incredibly intense it temporarily blinded anyone who looked directly at it. And then, boom. At the 10-second mark, a deafening explosion physically shook the earth, sending a massive, crushing pressure wave rushing outwards.
And look, this wasn't just a local anomaly that rattled some teacups. The sheer scale of the panic on the ground was completely unprecedented in modern recorded history. Tremors from the blast were felt hundreds of kilometers away. The kinetic shockwave was so violent it physically knocked people flat onto their backs far from the epicenter, completely shattering glass windows in surrounding homes. And then, this massive, choking cloud of fire and smoke rapidly rose into the upper atmosphere. For the isolated locals experiencing this incredible sensory overload, they genuinely believed the end of the world had arrived. To truly grasp the unbelievable power of this event, you have to consider the sheer footprint of the destruction, 2,000 square kilometers. To put that into perspective, imagine taking a major, sprawling metropolis, think New York or Tokyo, and just wiping it right off the map in a single instant. An estimated 80 million massive ancient pine and larch trees were completely flattened. They were uniformly pushed over, kind of like they were swept aside by an unimaginably huge invisible hand. The level of energy it takes to snap millions of thick tree trunks all at exactly the same time, it's staggering. We're talking the equivalent of hundreds of atomic bombs detonating all at once over the quiet taiga.
And this builds directly into our massive mystery. Logically, based on literally everything we know about astrophysics, we'd expect an impact of this sheer magnitude to leave an undeniable signature, namely a giant, deep crater punched straight into the Earth's crust. Because if a space rock hits us hard enough to flatten a regional forest, it's going to leave a massive scar, for sure. But the bizarre reality of Tunguska was millions of dead, flattened trees with absolutely zero sign of a crater. The Earth, right beneath the devastation, was completely undisturbed. No giant hole, no massive debris field of space rock. It is the ultimate plot twist in our story. Now, because this region was incredibly remote, nestled deep in the unforgiving Siberian wilderness, and because the world suddenly got distracted by huge global upheavals, World War I and the Russian Revolution, it actually took over a decade before scientists mounted an official expedition. So when Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik and his team finally stepped into this vast blast zone in the 1920s, they were walking onto a massive, frozen crime scene. They hiked through this grueling terrain looking for the obvious, the crater, the space rock, really any physical evidence of what had violently attacked the Earth. As investigators meticulously mapped out the destruction, they stumbled upon a truly bizarre anomaly at the exact dead center of the blast zone. Now, what's really interesting here is that they already knew the fallen trees radiated outwards in all directions, basically forming a pattern that looked like the spokes on a giant bicycle wheel. But at the very epicenter, the trees were standing perfectly straight up. Their branches and bark had been violently stripped away, leaving them looking like a wave of pure, intense, downward flames had just washed directly over them. Yet the trunks themselves hadn't budged. They hadn't been pushed over by the blast wave at all. Which leads us to a fascinating question. I want you to put your detective hat on for a second. If a giant, solid space rock crashed directly into the ground, why on earth were the delicate burned trees at the very center still standing straight up? A physical impact would have obliterated that center point entirely, smashing everything downward and outward deep into the bedrock and leaving a huge hole. Instead, the center stood eerily upright, like this haunting, burned monument to the blast. It directly, literally contradicted the mechanics of a ground impact.
As news of this bizarre anomaly spread, the world was thrown into total confusion, and the theories just exploded. Ideas ranged from the scientifically plausible to the highly spectacular. Some folks suggested a meteorite airburst, a massive space rock exploding midair. Others, definitely capturing the public's science fiction imagination, suggested an alien spaceship experiencing catastrophic engine failure over the isolated Siberian landscape. There were even hypotheses about small black holes or unknown cosmic forces from deep space. However, as the decades passed and our modeling technology got better and better, the scientific community began to seriously zero in on one specific mechanical explanation. So, the crucial point here is understanding the concept of an airburst. It's exactly what it sounds like, an explosion of a meteor or maybe a fragile comet while it is still traveling at thousands of miles per hour, high up in the Earth's atmosphere long before it ever touches the ground. The intense friction of our atmosphere basically acts like a brick wall, causing the rock to violently detonate midair. When this happens, it releases immense downward thermal energy and blinding heat. And guys, this perfectly explains our standing trees. The initial shockwave blasts straight down at the epicenter, stripping the branches but leaving the trunks upright. Then the subsequent outward shockwave flattens the surrounding forest. And, crucially, it perfectly explains why there's no crater. But actually, scratch that. Before we fully close the case file on this one, we have to look at the missing evidence. To this very day, well over a century later, despite countless modern scientific expeditions using advanced ground-penetrating radar and aerial surveys, no clear crater has ever been found. And perhaps even more puzzlingly, no definitive large fragments of a massive space rock have ever been recovered from the site. While scientists have found some microscopic traces of meteoric material in the soil, the complete lack of a large physical piece of the rock to definitively study means that technically, the mystery remains open. Which leaves us with a truly chilling summary of the event. Tunguska remains the explosion that shook the Earth, wiped out an entire forest, but left behind only questions. It absolutely stands as history's most mysterious and terrifying cosmic encounter. But it's more than just a historical curiosity. It serves as a stark, visceral reminder of the immense, unpredictable kinetic forces just swirling around our tiny blue planet in the vastness of space. It forces us to confront exactly how fragile our environment truly is when matched against the sheer physics of our solar system. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. We know the universe is highly dynamic, and our planet is essentially a moving target orbiting the sun. So what happens when the next massive fireball enters our atmosphere? Will it detonate over an empty, icy forest like it did in 1908, or over a bustling metropolis? It's exactly the kind of question that keeps astronomers and planetary defense experts awake at night, and it's what drives modern efforts to map near-Earth objects. I really hope this explainer has given you a clear understanding of this incredible event and sparked a bit of curiosity about the cosmos. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.